Like I said, thank you for sticking it out. I hope you've enjoyed the camp. I know the people who organize this work pretty hard. I know Genevieve and Brandon, they're always on meetings and Skype meetings and stuff. So yeah, thank you for them and everybody who put on the camp. This session is going to be on front-end development tools. I don't know if have you ever heard of the Boilerstrap.js, Boilerplate 9, kind of the play on all the crazy things that are out there. That's kind of where I came up with this title. It sounds a little ridiculous, but these are actually real things, and hopefully we're going to get to them today. Everything today. Full disclosure, I finished my slides this morning. I haven't really timed out how long my session is going to take. I really would like to. Everything we're going to kind of go over in the slides is kind of agnostic to Drupal, so you don't even need Drupal. They're front-end development tools, so if you're using like a WordPress or something like that, these tools would work for basically any of those development environments. But I do, if I have time at the end, I do want to bring this back into Drupal and kind of show you a project, how I kind of approach the project and kind of my mentality as far as like theming and using Sass and kind of give you a overall structure. At the end of my presentation, I'll give you a GitHub URL that is kind of my starter project in order to get kind of going in Drupal. It's kind of like a quick download, let's get started, let's get theming. So, like I said, my name is Adam Delaney. I work for the University of Iowa. I got this shirt yesterday. I don't work for Four Kitchens, but I didn't want to do any laundry, and it's actually a pretty nice shirt. So, I work for the University of Iowa. My Drupal user ID is Adam Delaney. I'm not super active on there, but I like to file issues and complain about things that are broken. So kind of in the beginning, right, we had HTML, we had CSS, we had JavaScript. Didn't seem too bad to work with. Three things to get around in. And that was pretty good. These days, feels like the web is pretty complex. We have all these things, JavaScript libraries, front-end frameworks, task runners, package managers. You can see the list. It gets crazy, right? And there's new things every day, it seems like. Kind of makes me feel like this. Pulling my hair out, trying to understand what these new tools are. But why do we need these front-end tools? These front-end tools are great because they help coordinate and ensure consistency between your development environments, consistency between your other developers. So if not just you are working on a project and somebody else is, kind of gives a recipe for doing things in the same way. Provides a way to kind of keep track of like different modules or different projects. Managing those packages. So like if you need to update, let's say Bootstrap, you can do it in a consistent way. And it provides the ability to automate tasks and kind of like the 5 steps you need to run over and over and over and over again, we can automate all that. So it's just set it and forget it. So what are we doing today? I like metaphors. I think that's a good way to kind of remember things. So this presentation is in a metaphor of building an omelet or making an omelet. And we're going to start with Node.js. And I kind of equate Node.js down to the kitchen supply store. What is it? It's open source cross-development platform. It's built on Google's V8 JavaScript engine. It's very fast. It runs server-side because a lot of people think JavaScript, they think about the browser, they think about the client side, but this is actually server-side for building out web applications. If you want to know more, the URL to get more information. There's 2 installation methods. You can go to their website and click download, and there's like basically a package that downloads. You can just install it straight into your computer. There's another method called, you can use like NVM, it's I think short for Node Version Manager, and it's more of a command line thing. And it allows you to have multiple node environments. So like if you're doing Angular and you're doing some of these other things, you might need different versions of Node.js. So that's a way to install it and have like different environments for Node.js. Inside Node.js, there's a command called npm, and I kind of relate npm to a trip to the kitchen supply store. So what is it? It's a package manager for Node.js. It ships with it, so you don't have to install it or do anything. It's a command line, so you just open up a terminal window, and you can run this, I don't know if it's easy to read, npm install, and a project name or a module name on from the Node.js kind of store, and it will go out and get that project and bring it down to your machine. There's kind of two ways that you can go get a project or a module. You can download it globally so that that project can be used basically anywhere in your environment, or you can download it kind of locally, and that project would just be used for like one specific project. So there are instances where, like, if you're needing a module and you need it for like every single project, you might just want to install that globally, and then you'll have that project globally. There's other instances where, depending on the project that you have, you might just want that module just for that one specific project. Package.json is kind of like a shopping list for the kitchen supply store. So a package.json file typically just lists all the Node modules that you want to go get. There's thousands of Node.js modules out there, not just for front-end development, just for like just stuff. There's tons of them. So there's modules out there for compiling Sass and CSS and JS linting, optimization of images, CSS prefixing. There's so many tools out there that you can go out there and get. When npm runs, it will install the modules as well as any of the dependencies, which is kind of nice. So if Node Sass needs these 5 other Node modules, you don't actually have to go list that. It knows that it needs to get Node Sass, and Node Sass needs these 5 other things, and it goes and grabs that. Uses semantic versioning, which I find very, very confusing. So I listed the URL here, and you can go read about it and figure it out. There's different types of dependencies that you can actually call inside of a package.json file. There's dev dependencies, there's regular dependencies, dev dependencies, and bundle dependencies. For this talk, we're really only talking about dev dependencies because really they're just the tools that you need to create the website. The website itself doesn't need these tools. You need these tools in order to like kind of write your job, like write your Sass and compile it to your CSS. So for this talk, really, we're only talking about dev dependencies or development dependencies. A little tip here: if you're using Git, it's a good idea to just ignore the node modules folder. So when you run npm install and it goes and gets all these items, it's actually a pretty big, there's tons of binaries in there, and it's actually a pretty big file. And it's a good idea just to ignore that, because otherwise you're just pushing duplicate code all the way up to Git, and it could take a while. Those repos become pretty big. For more information on authoring or just information about what a package.json file is, there's that link right there that will give you all the information you need. This is just an example of what the package.json file is. There's a few kind of required things. It needs a name, a description. You can set scripts in here for it to run. So when you run, like run setup, it will go and do these commands, npm install and bower install. We'll talk about bower here in a minute. And then you can see my dev dependencies. So this is kind of my kitchen supply run. When I go to the kitchen supply store, this is what I ask it to go get. Some image optimization tools, Node Sass for compiling your Sass. Is everybody here writing Sass or rewriting CSS? Or a little bit of both? Okay. We'll talk about Sass a little bit later, hopefully I have time. And then I'm getting a bunch of Gulp projects, and we'll talk about Gulp here in a minute. But yeah, this is kind of my grocery list, or my tool list that I want. And when I run npm installer, will go and get all these things for me. So yep, getting your node packages, you run npm install, it checks your package.json file, goes and grabs all your tools, brings them down, and you're ready to go. npm shrinkwrap, this is a very, very useful thing. So when I first started kind of working with these set of tools, I would go and get all these versions and bring them down, and then I would have another developer friend work on it, and he would go get these versions. But for some reason, those versions were different than my versions because the maintainers had actually bumped a version level up, and we were finding weird discrepancies between the two. So Node.js ships with a command called shrinkwrap. And what shrinkwrap will do is it will go and get all very specific file versions. So if it's like 1.0.3, and it will make a file and list them all out. So like when your developer friend then goes and installs that, it looks to see that you have this shrinkwrap file, and it says, oh, don't get the latest of all these. Go get the version that I'm using, so that we're all on the same page. So like I said, it creates a locked file of your Node modules using the exact versions. There's nothing you need to install to use it. It just ships with Node.js. And like I said, since we're using and declaring dev dependencies, you need to pass the -dev flag in order for shrinkwrap to get those versions too. So that's just a tip. So I'm hungry. Where's my omelet? To review, we've installed Node.js. We decided what tools we need to create an omelet in our package.json file. So like a frying pan is our Node Sass, and a spatula is our Gulp auto prefixer. Whisk is our Sass glob, and like you saw the file, so all the things in there. We ran npm install to get all of our tools, and we've shrink wrapped to lock down exactly what tools we were getting. So for an example, our frying pan is not just a frying pan, it's this frying pan, Gotham steel 9.5, non-stick titanium, blah, blah, blah. So we know exactly what we're using, and that's created our npm shrinkwrap.json file. The next tool is called Bower, and we actually got Bower in from our first list that was in there, Bower. So this is a Node module, and I kind of equate Bower to the grocery store. So we went to the kitchen store supply, but now we need to go to the grocery store. Bower is a Node.js module. It's a package manager for web components that can contain HTML, CSS, JavaScript, fonts, just a plethora of things. So there's a ton of Bower packages out there. Downloads and installs packages from a variety of different endpoints and can be installed by running npm install Bower. And I typically install this globally because I don't want to have to like download a local version every single time, because this is something that you'll be using quite often. Full documentation on Bower is at that address, so you can read all about it. Bower needs a Bower JSON file, and again, this is another shopping list. It's I equate it to the shopping list of ingredients, so it's your eggs and your whatever you want in your omelet. What should we get at the store? It just depends. Depends on what you need. Things that I get, we use Bootstrap or a Bootstrap camp, and so I tell Bower to go get Bootstrap. I tell Bower to go get a bunch of JavaScript libraries I use. Maybe you need jQuery, waypoints, animate. We use Font Awesome, so I tell Bower to go get Font Awesome. And there's just so many more other front-end tools out there, and they typically have a Bower package, so you can just tell Bower to go get those. This is an example of a Bower JSON file. It actually looks very similar to our package JSON file because it's just a JSON file. In here, the ignore, don't worry about that. That's if you're creating an actual Bower package, then you can say ignore these files. But yeah, my dependencies are actually pretty slim here. I say I want Bootstrap Sass, I want Font Awesome, and I want waypoints. And that's pretty much all I need from Bower. So we run Bower install, and Bower install runs out to the store. It gets all of our components and brings them back to our local machine. So we have our frying pans, we have our spatula, we have our tools. That was Node. We have kind of all the little front end bits that we want, kind of the ingredients, right? The eggs and the cheese and everything you want in your omelet. What is Gulp? Gulp is an automation tool. So it's a task automation tool. It's a very simple API, and it automates tasks like compiling your Sass, if you're using Sass. It can optimize your images, it can run linting, it can notify you of errors. It's all JavaScript, so if you're a JavaScript guru, you can pretty much write a JavaScript application and have Gulp run it. So full documentation on Gulp is right here. The thing I like about Gulp, there's other competitors out there. Grunt is another kind of task automation tool. The reason why I like Gulp is it's very, very simple. The API actually is there's only four actually API things. Gulp source, so the source of the assets you want to work with. Gulp destination, kind of creates files and like tells where those files should live. Gulp task is basically just defines a task that you want Gulp to run. And Gulp watch is just basically a way to watch folders to see as files change, I need to do something. So an example would be as you're changing your Sass, if you're writing Sass, then it sees a change and it says, oh, I need to recompile all the Sass, and it writes it out to your declared CSS folder. The documentation on the API is, .pipe. I'll show you the Gulp file. .pipe is basically the idea of do this, and then do this, and then do this. So it's like the .pipe command is just chaining all the little tasks, kind of all the things that you want to do together. So this config.json file is not required. It's kind of nice because you can just store kind of all your configuration in this file, and it's kind of set aside, so you don't have to kind of read all that inside your Gulp file. It typically contains things like file names, source paths, destination paths, include paths. It can contain variables and any other amount of kind of JavaScript-y things that you want to do. This is an example. So for this specific project, you can kind of see for my CSS task, I wanted to create a file called subthemeradix style.scss. The source of that is at this path. When you write the CSS, the destination should live at this location, assets/CSS. So it's just kind of, like I said, a configuration file, so that when Gulp goes and looks, it kind of knows where all this information, or where all these things should come from and need to go. So we're doing good. Gulpfile.js. This was kind of a hard one to kind of adapt into my metaphor, but basically your Gulpfile.js file is it's the file that you author in order to create the task that you want to run. The file contains the automation task to be ran, the defined workflow steps using the Gulp.js API, so kind of those 4 commands that we talked about earlier, and it basically just builds tasks that you can run from the command line. Here's an example of a Gulp.js file, fairly simple. So you can kind of see down through here all those kind of Node.js packages that I asked for, kind of the kitchen supply store. I'm including them here so I can use them. Like shrinkwrap, prefixer. So I need to let Gulp know that, hey, I have these things and now I want to use them. So now Gulp knows that it has these. You can see the config file is in there. So I've included that and I have access to that file. Inside here, I've defined a Gulp CSS task. And you can kind of see that it's first getting the configuration file, so it's available to the task itself, kind of all those destination tasks, those source tasks. Inside this CSS task, now I have access to all that information. Glob is like, it's a Sass thing. So for those of you who work with Sass, typically in order for you to compile your Sass, like you have to go and save like the master Sass file. Well, globbing kind of just like allows you to say, at this location, include all the files that are in here. So you don't have to list each one of them out. It's kind of handy, especially if you have a lot of partials. I like to break things down into small little bits. When I'm doing my Sass and my CSS, I find it more maintainable. And that way I don't have to go and just include everything. I can just say, include everything in this folder. Some error handling. Source maps are really nice. So if you're using Sass, source maps allow kind of when you're inspecting your CSS, it kind of creates a connection back to your Sass file. So you can see in the CSS I'm here, but this is actually where the Sass declaration lives. It's kind of handy for debugging some CSS problems. If you are using Sass, you can tell Gulp how you want it to compile. Auto prefixer is great. I don't know, like I said, how many people are using Sass, but when I first started using Sass, I started using a project called Compass, and what Compass would allow me to do would kind of fix all the browser prefix browser vendor things. So like instead of saying like opacity, you'd have to do like dash dash Moz opacity and then dash dash, like all the vendor prefix things. So when Compass came out, there was a way that you could just in Sass say add include opacity and you pass it your opacity value, and it would go and like create all the different vendor prefixes for you. Auto prefixer I find as like kind of a better replacement for that. And the reason why I think it works better is you can just write out your CSS like normal, and then when Gulp runs, it says, go find the things that like need vendor prefixes and just include that. So you're not using like a weird add include anymore. You're just writing kind of normal CSS. And then they give you ways to kind of configure this. So auto prefixer here, I'm saying when you run auto prefixer, use the last 2 versions of the latest like browser releases. And also I want you to support IE9 and IE10. So there's some syntax in there to say what browsers you want to prefix for and how you want to handle that. The next task here is just a writing to the source map file. And then the last task here is saying, once you're all done, I want you to create my CSS file at this destination. And if we go back, I think that was assets/CSS. So when it gets done with the CSS task, it will write all my Sass, clean it all up, prefix it, do everything that I've asked it to do, and then write that CSS file at that path. So it's pretty handy. It saves a lot of steps. This next one is a shrinkwrap task. I'm just asking it to basically make sure, if I install a new node module, make sure that you update that so that everybody has that same version. Waypoints, I use waypoints in a lot of projects. I don't know if you're familiar, it's a JavaScript library, and it kind of gives you the ability to add classes as things come into the page. I like that. I think this is an interesting one because the way that we got waypoints is we asked Bower, that's our trip to the grocery store, we asked Bower to go get waypoints. But waypoints isn't doing anything right now, right? It's just sitting in a folder in your project called Bower Components. And again, kind of how I said, we shouldn't really be adding all the node modules to our Git repo. We probably shouldn't be adding all the Bower components either, because it's pulling down everything. And you don't need all the, like, really all you want is like the distribution file. You just want the JavaScript. You just want the thing that works. You don't really need to put all the documentation and the README files, and you don't really need all that stuff. So what I'm saying here is, go look in my Bower folder where you pulled down waypoints. This is the source of where that thing lives. And then grab this file and write it to this path, so my assets.js waypoints path. And that is just going to get just the thing I need, putting it inside my project, and that way I don't have to include all the bits. I just get what I want. I got a little JavaScript task in here. Again, it uses source maps, and the reason why source maps are kind of nice for my JavaScript is because I'm using this uglify, and I can kind of show you how that works. Uglify, basically, there is a watch command for this too. So the way I'm running this is I write all my Drupal behaviors into a JavaScript folder, and I like to separate them all out so it's really easy to maintain and see. When Gulp runs, it looks to see, oh, do I have a new JavaScript file, or is there a change to this JavaScript file? And then it goes and grabs all that JavaScript, concatenates them together, so it like puts all those 6 files together into one, and then Uglify basically takes out all the little spaces and like kind of jams it all together. So when you're looking at it, it's just like a bunch of letters, basically. It's really hard to understand and read. But it's kind of nice because it kind of condenses your file and it makes it a little more optimized for users who need to pull down that file. And this is something that just happens automatically for me. So I can just separate all my JavaScript out and write my behaviors. I can write one in one file and one in another file, and this just optimizes it all for me. It's really nice. This next one is just an image task. So if I include like some images in that I want to use in a template file, I don't want to have to open, Photoshop and compress it, and I don't want to do all these things. Drupal has ways of kind of optimizing those things too. But if you're not running the file through Drupal, like let's say you're using it as a background image, this task is kind of nice because it will go and just do that for you. So you don't need to go do anything for that. Font task, basically this is just copying out. So we use Font Awesome. This is saying go, find all the font assets and copy them into this location. And then the last thing here is I'm basically saying create a task that just watches everything. So this last one says watch for JavaScript changes, watch for CSS changes, watch for image changes, and anytime you see anything, go and do what you're supposed to do. Go do one of these tasks. Yeah. So to make our omelet, to get Gulp working, once you have Gulp installed, you just go to the location where your Gulp.js file or Gulpfile.js file is, and in the terminal window, you just run Gulp. And it just, the way I have mine set up, you can set yours up different ways, but when I run the Gulp command, it just says, it starts up a little terminal, like a little job tasker, and it just starts looking. It's just waiting for me to make changes. And I can go into my project, start making my Sass changes, start adding images, start adding my JavaScript, and the magic is all being done behind the scenes. So it really is there really are big advantages, I think, to knowing the system, kind of knowing what's going on. There's a lot of like I said, competitors out there. So by no means is this the only way to do it. This is kind of, I guess, my way. This is my way. This is the way I'm making the omelet. So if you like Grunt, great, go learn Grunt. If you like using other projects, go use those other projects, definitely. But I think the main point is there is a reason why all these tools exist. It is supposed to make your life easier. And yeah, it's kind of crazy when you first get into it. It's like, what is all this stuff and why do I need it? But like I said, once you kind of know the basics, then it really does make your life a lot easier. So a quick review, we installed Node.js. We made a list of our kitchen hardware. That was our Package.json file. We picked up our kitchen hardware by running npm install. We documented exactly what hardware we used by running npm shrinkwrap --dev. We made a list of our omelet ingredients using our bower.json file. We defined a list of useful Gulp variables, and I couldn't really come up with a metaphor for this, so we're just calling this config.json. We created a kind of a recipe file, and that's our Gulpfile.js, and then we made our delicious omelet by running Gulp. Just some tips. Steal. So you can go and kind of create all these files yourself. Like you can run bower init, and in the terminal window, it'll ask you what's the name of your project, and like you can kind of build all these files yourself. But when I first started, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I have no clue. And I went out and I grabbed basically like a kind of a starter kit, and that's how I kind of got into it. So yeah, go and steal. I have this repo right here. We use the base theme. So if you know Bootstrap or like Bootstrap, we use the Radix base theme, and it kind of gets you a good starting point if you're in Drupal and integrates kind of some of the Bootstrap components for you. So yes, if you're using Bootstrap and you want to start playing around with some of these front-end tools, I have a starter kit out there, modified a little bit, kind of for my liking. I didn't like the way that the base theme is kind of organizing some of the Bootstrap variables and some of the other things, so I kind of tweaked it a little bit. Another tip is to give back, file issues, anything that you can do to kind of go out there in the community and support the community, because all this is open source. So I think it's always good. Create. If you get more into it, create Node.js modules or create packages, or contribute back to code repos like GitHub repos or public repos and share that out into the world, because I think that's one of the great things about open source is that it's a great way to learn and a great way to give back. All right, I want to thank the attendees, so thank you for coming, the sponsors, the planners, the Drupal community, my personal team of developers from the University of Iowa, Brandon Neal, Genevieve Johnson, you can see I was working on this very quickly this morning, Genevieve Johnson, Joe Whitsitt, Rick Porter, Brian Dickey, Mark Aarons, and Rami Bolton. Where are we at? Oh, we have lots of time, so we're doing pretty good, right? All right. Does anybody have any questions first? You got it now, right? Pretty easy.
I brought this up in Jacob's section too, but I know you didn't mention Scout, and so I wonder, have you heard of Scout? I think it's kind of like a small, very small pilot, but it's one of them in Gulp, I'm sure.
Okay. You know, I guess I haven't. To be fully honest, the list of front-end tools out there are insane. Like, it's enough to kind of blow your mind. I feel like I hear about new things all the time. So if you're subscribing to like Smashing Magazine or something like that, it's pretty front-end oriented. Okay.
So, and it was to get up and running to be able to compile Sass.
Okay.
Because I don't know all of that other stuff. And
Yep.
It seemed like there's so much to read about it. And it was much quicker.
Yep. So Sass wasn't like, I kind of came in with, I've been working with Sass for a while. I kind of came in with the assumption that I wasn't really going to go over directly Sass, but I would have to say, if you're still writing CSS, I don't know, stop. Use Sass. It's great. It's going to make your life better. Much, much better. And actually, the version of Sass that we use is using the SCSS file. Mm-hmm. So you can just write normal CSS in there. It's kind of nice because as you start picking up the tips and tricks, then you can start using those and going back and kind of replacing things and making things better. But it's not hard to kind of get a Sass compiler running. If you use this system here of Node, there's a project called Node Sass, and then Gulp, the three together can compile your Sass for you.
See, all I have to do is load Scout.
Okay.
On my Windows, because we brought over a copy of the production which had all this SCSS
Yep.
files. So
Yep.
when I went to make changes, I needed to compile it on.
Sure.
And so that's all they loaded.
Yep. And that might be great, especially if you just want to get into Sass, you know, and you want something simple. That might be perfect.
If you need something quick,
Sure.
because you want to you have to make the changes, but you don't know enough about it yet to really know.
Yep. Yep. Sass is one of those projects. It can be a little frustrating at times. We actually switched, so there's all these flavors of Sass, and they've actually come together and made the releases and stuff much better. But pretty much in the beginning, Sass came out as a Ruby project. We made a switch to what they call libsass, and we run now the flavor Node Sass probably a couple of years ago. And the main reason why is because the only reason I needed to know Ruby was to compile my Sass, which is kind of ludicrous. It's like, why am I learning a language that like I never use on my day-to-day basis? I have to maintain and like learn all this stuff about. Yeah, it's quite a bit. Yep. So we made the move to they call it libsass, and we run Node Sass just because it's JavaScript, and I guess that's something. I'm not a JavaScript master, but at least I can go in there and see and like understand a little bit of it. Like I don't have to learn this new system. But yes, I'm a huge proponent of Sass. It's gonna make life much better. It's pretty neat, all the things that it can do. I'm a designer, so I love all the little color functions that you can do. All the ways you can kind of create little snippets of CSS code and make it reusable, really easy. It's great. It's fantastic. Organizing it really easily. So I recommend it. So if Scout's your method, do it. And like I said, engage the community and like start simple. Seriously, learn one thing. Learn how to declare a variable and start using variables, because that's going to help you out the most. When I first came into Sass, I knew nothing, and I found that's kind of how I started. I'm like, oh wow, I can use a color variable instead of saying hex whatever 1 2 3 4 5 6 or whatever. And then I can update that variable later and change that color value everywhere that variable is used. And it's like kind of mind blowing, seriously, to like have the ability to kind of do that. And I like it as like a developer. I like having access to like kind of smart tools because CSS is kind of dumb. You're just like writing things and telling it how to be. Where Sass is definitely more of a programming language, and even if you start really simple, the deeper you go, like I think the easier it's going to make your life, your job. I've been working with Sass a long time, and I still see like sophisticated Sass projects. I'm like, what the heck are they doing here? They're like declaring crazy functions and doing crazy stuff like that. So I think we're all somewhere on the spectrum. You know, there's the experts up here, there's the beginner down here, but I don't think that's a reason not to start. Like I said, Sass is going to get you. You're going to love it. Just start somewhere and.
There's just been a lot of starting. It just seems like you're starting like something with Drupal like you.
Yep.
I started last fall, so I'm really not that good.
Yep.
And it's then you throw in Sass, and you're just getting all these.
One thing I can say about the Sass specifically is it's pretty mature, and I don't think it's going anywhere. There's a few ideas tossing around like post CSS. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's kind of a new concept. I still kind of see it as a CSS preprocessor. I've looked into it a little bit. And that's kind of gaining a little traction, but I don't think Sass is going anywhere for a long time. I think it's worth learning. It's going to be here for a while, and it really is going to make life better, easier. It really is. Any other questions? So we have a little time, I believe. I don't know specifically when this session is supposed to end. 3:45 to nothing. Oh, okay. So what? Okay, we have time. So why don't I kind of wouldn't see this. Kind of showing you what's in this starter tag. This happens to be a different version. Oops. Kind of hard to see that. Can you see this left side? All right. I don't know how to. Maybe this will work. Yeah, it looks like it's only enlarging the right side for some reason, not the left. Let's see. That's a little bit better, I think. So this happens to be a project that I was working on, but basically this was the template that I used in order to create the Radix starter kit. You can kind of see my Bower components. So when I ran Bower install, like I said, it went out to the grocery store. It got all the things for me. Node modules. This is why you don't want to include node modules in your Git repo because there's hundreds of things in here. It's crazy. Each node module may have like 5 or 6 other node dependencies. So it's going and getting all this stuff. And yeah, there's just no reason because those binaries already exist. So like, why put it back in the fold again? Yep.
Why are you using Bower and Node at the same time?
So, no, Node is like basically, I kind of see it as it's like it doesn't have the things like the front-end frameworks or the JavaScript libraries. There may be a little crossover, but like Node is actually a huge project, and like there's a lot of people doing some really interesting things in Node. As far as like kind of the front-end pieces, Bower to me has like kind of the goodies that I want. The things like the Bootstrap and all the JavaScript libraries. So I think that there's a departure there.
See, I've seen the opposite.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, and that may be true. By no means am I an expert in that. This is kind of, like I said, my recipe. This is what I learned. This was kind of my recipe. So that may be true. So yeah, sorry I couldn't answer your question a little bit better. So yeah, when you run npm install, it's getting all these node modules. You can see I have my package.json file in here. my npm shrinkwrap. This is all in like my theme, my sub theme. Kind of want to go over a little bit. Like I said, you're not quite into Sass yet, but I'm gonna make you a believer. Is anybody else unfamiliar with Sass? Okay. This is more Drupal specific. So I'm kind of one of these people. Every single time I started a project, I would come up with a new Sass structure, and it would drive everybody else nuts because it could never find like where I put something. And over time, I've been working at the university for about 5 years. We started working in Sass probably maybe a year after I started there, so about 4 years. I found a system that I feel like works pretty good for my Drupal development, and I kind of want to share that because there's so many different ways to do that, and sometimes it gets really confusing. But I've kind of come up with these levels of kind of how I organize all my Sass, and for me, it's a much more maintainable and a better way. So the gist of it is I have all these folders, and all these folders get imported into this master SCSS file sheet. And there's this idea in Sass where you can just say at import, and it says go get this file, go get this file, go get this file. And the reason why this is so long, it's kind of crazy in here, is that first off, if I'm using Bootstrap and I kind of want to streamline my or optimize my CSS, I might not need all the components in Bootstrap. So I list those out, and let's say in this case, I didn't like Bootstrap's breadcrumbs. I didn't want to include it. So I list them all out individually, and if I'm not really using something, I'll come in here and kind of comment it out or take it out. Now, it kind of optimizes things a little bit because there's no reason to put the CSS code in there if you're not using it. So that's the reason why I have all that listed out. The other thing is I'm using what I said, like I said, globbing, and you can kind of see this little star notation. And what that says is, if you look inside this folder, let's look inside components. You see that? So components has tons of folders, and inside these folders, there's even probably more stuff, right? View modes. I mean, there's like a bunch of files in here, and you could have 100 view mode files. I don't want to list that out and at import inside here every single time I create a new file. So the globbing is a really useful tool because I can just say, grab all the files inside this folder and include them as part of my Sass compiler. So that's kind of nice. If without that, it would be a pretty big file. Let's see, I got some Bootstrap stuff in here. So yeah, this is kind of my master import list. I don't really do add imports at a lower level. I like to do it all here. So I'm not wondering where that item is getting imported at. I do it in my master import file, and I know exactly this is it. This is another reason why is then you can really actually see kind of the processing order because of the way CSS works in the cascade. It's nice to kind of see what order things are getting processed in. So I use a master file there. Let's go through base. In base, I have a few like kind of high level folders. Abstractions are basically like it's kind of a junk drawer. I have like a lot of base classes and things, a lot of reusable components, I guess is what I call them. Things that I call over and over and over again. So yeah, that goes in the abstractions, like this element invisible. There's a bunch of interesting things in here. Let's look at functions. So I didn't even write this. This is a custom function that I needed for some other Sass that I wrote. But if you are getting into writing Sass functions, I've made a folder for that. Libraries. So this is like, I use Animate to do kind of like the transform, or like the animation, CSS animation stuff. I created a folder for this so I can just like dump the entire project in there, and it's kind of out of the way. And then I just call the things that I need. So like this folder is pretty big, has a lot of items in here. That way it's just kind of out of the way. I know it's kind of like somebody else's work. I don't really want to see it in my Sass structure, so I create this libraries folder. Mix-ins, these are just like little custom snippets and bits that I that I use over and over. As you get more into Sass, you'll know what I'm mixing in, and I try to put all those into my mixin folder. And then variables. I have several variables. The main reason is Bootstrap has its own set of variables, so I keep all those separate so I don't have to like look at those all the time. If I do need to change it, I can go in there and change it. I have local variables, so this is kind of for my project. And a lot of the little items in here are like more specific to me and my preferred way of developing. You can create variables however you want. I like to use font weight variables. I try to variabilize a lot of stuff. But it just makes things easier to change later. So yeah, these are kind of just project variables. You can see colors, so I've created some color variables. Elements. So elements are basically like your HTML elements. I built a folder for this so that I can kind of import it at the right time. So I want, basically maybe an image to be styled a certain way, but later on I might want to override the way a specific image works. So I just put them all in here. So that would be like, yeah, any HTML element I would style inside there. Components is kind of the meat of it. And this is how I kind of break down, I guess, Drupal and its structure. So I have a folder for blocks, and I put like all the block definitions inside here, typically by block and then ID. Bootstrap, sometimes I want to override what Bootstrap is doing. Sometimes they make assumptions inside their CSS, and it's not very easy to go in there and just change that. So I just basically override it here using the cascade, and I can just change little things that they've assumed. Fields. What I normally put in here are like pretty global field things. So like I said, field label, if I don't like the way field label is outputting everywhere, I'll create a partial for that and override it everywhere. There are times kind of like, do I put something in the fields folder, but it's attached to a node? Like, where do I kind of do that? I try to make that distinction based upon the things that go in fields are like global. They're everywhere. Every time I see this field, I always want it to look this way. Forms. This one's kind of a weird one. I don't know why that's in there. Okay, so page regions is basically your Drupal regions, like the things that are kind of defined in your page template file. It's kind of, again, kind of the idea of the global page. So like your headers and your footers and the kind of the big chunks on the page. And I know exactly where those are at. We're a panel shop, so I put all my panel stuff in here. Obviously, I didn't do much panel theming in here. Theming functions, so this is interesting. If you're getting into writing your own like render arrays and your own theming functions, not necessarily a great place because it's not really a block. It could be a block, it could be something else. It just depends on how it renders out. So I've created this theming functions folder, and that's pretty much where my like custom theme render arrays and stuff like that, that's where that style goes. View modes are great. I leverage these the most, probably. In Drupal, does everybody know what a view mode is? In Drupal world? So these get used quite a bit. It's kind of at that kind of level where a lot of things go in there. Most of these have, quite a few definitions. So you can kind of see if there's a field on there, typically I will style it inside the view mode, because a lot of times I feel like when my other developers are looking at my projects, they're not necessarily, they think it's a field, but they're more thinking about, oh, it's a field on this node. So they're thinking like, let's go find where this kind of node view mode is, and then I expect to kind of find the style for that in there. So you can see this could go into fields, but I've actually chosen to put it into the view mode. Views, again, these are global views things. Just depending if views goes into a page, sometimes I put that at the page level. WYSIWYG is just kind of random. So if I need to override things inside, like if I create special classes that get exposed from CK editor, then I just write those inside here. I don't think there's much. We created a callout class, so our people can create callouts, and so I know where that lives. And then page. So page gets used. I don't have much in here front. Page is interesting. I will typically spin up a page partial when, let's say you have a page and there's maybe a view on the page and maybe also a block and a view mode. And there's like something maybe at the global level that you want to do. Like you want to put it into some type of grid system or something. I will use page to kind of tell it how to look and behave. I don't want to put it in the view mode because I assume that the view mode could get called somewhere else. I don't want to make the assumption that, you know, for this specific page, when you use this view mode, I want it to look this way. But somebody else could use the view mode somewhere else, and I don't necessarily want it to look that way. So again, I use page as kind of the top level global override to say, for this specific page, I want you to look exactly like this. And it kind of, I always use it, the page class, so whatever, like page dot whatever, and organize it that way. So that's kind of my system. It's not perfect. It's got me around. It's a lot better than what I used to do, which was kind of random for each project. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks.